Why do we celebrate July 4th? Why fireworks? Why red, white, and blue? Why does this date stir something so deep in every American heart? Is it just a summer holiday or something far greater? What if the truth behind this day isn't just about independence, but about rebellion, control, and the birth of an idea powerful enough to shake the world? This is not just a story about America, it's a story about what happens when ordinary people decide they will no longer be ruled. The colonies, land of the free, not yet, long before the name United States meant anything. There were 13 colonies, built by settlers, farmers, dreamers, but they didn't belong to themselves. They belonged to the British Empire. The king was across the ocean, but his laws reached every home. Every cup of tea, every printed page was taxed, controlled, and worst of all, the colonists had no say, no vote, no voice in the decisions that shaped their lives. British soldiers were stationed in their towns, and even in their homes. That was called quartering. It meant you had to feed and shelter the empire's men, even if it meant giving up your privacy, even if it meant living with fear. To many, this wasn't protection, it was invasion, and it was only getting worse. But even the strongest chains will crack, and in these colonies, the silence was already starting to break. People began to whisper in taverns, meet in secret, and speak words that no one had dared to say aloud. No taxation without representation. It wasn't a slogan, it was a scream. The British didn't take it lightly. They pushed back with even harsher laws, more taxes, more troops, but something had already shifted. The colonists, once loyal to the crown, began to see themselves not as subjects, but as something more, as Americans. From the growing unrest rose minds that would shape history. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, they weren't kings, they weren't warriors, but they had something more dangerous, an idea. That freedom was not a gift, but a right. That power should come from the people, not from a throne. So they organized, they wrote, they spoke in packed halls and candlelit rooms. They knew they couldn't win with muskets alone. They would need something stronger, a document, a declaration. It was 1776. The war had already begun, but something was still missing. A statement, an answer to the question, why are we fighting? So they gathered 56 representatives from 13 colonies, and on July 4th, they adopted a bold new document, the Declaration of Independence. It was written mostly by Jefferson, but signed by many, men who knew that putting their name on it could cost them everything, because to the British, this wasn't politics. It was treason, but they signed, and those signatures echoed across the Atlantic. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those weren't just words, they were a line in the sand. The British didn't walk away. They brought fire, gunpowder, ships that blackened the horizon. The Revolutionary War raged on. Farmers became soldiers. Teenagers became messengers. Entire towns burned to ash. There were winters with no shoes. Battles lost, friends buried, but still they fought, because this wasn't about land anymore. It was about becoming something new, a nation where people were not ruled, but free. And in 1783, after 8 years of bloodshed, that freedom was won. Now every July 4th, the sky fills with fireworks, the streets with celebration, But beneath it all, there is something sacred, something deeper than the surface. This day is not about the past. It's a reminder that freedom comes at a cost, and that the right to speak, to live, to dream was carved out of sacrifice. That's why we honor July 4th, not just for what was, but for what it continues to mean. Not just for America, but for every soul that dares to be free. Final reflection, the forgotten July 2nd. One last secret. Did you know the vote for independence happened on July 2nd? But it took 2 more days to finalize the wording, and only then did the declaration become real. So July 4th isn't just about when we said it, it's about when we dared to believe it.